Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you let him leave with the truck
Yes,
after
ma'am.
the search?
Yes, ma'am.
So he took it home.
Yes, ma'am.
And during the course of your investigation, you talked a little bit with the state about that. You learned that Tonia was also seeing somebody by the name of Bradley Rodriguez, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you learned that Tonia's mother, Tonia actually lived with her mother and Bradley Rodriguez, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Bradley and Tonia lived at Tonia's mother's house.
Yes, ma'am, briefly.
Okay, and that Bradley was kicked out of Tonia's mother's house in March of 2018 because Bradley was violent with Tonia.
Yes.
And you learned that Bradley was possibly one of the fathers, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You also learned that there was another potential father of the baby by the name of Mark Burke, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you learned through the course of your investigation that Mark Burke actually had a turbulent relationship with Miss Wise. Is that correct?
As I recall, yes, ma'am.
And that he had actually abused her and was arrested, correct?
I don't recall if he was arrested for abuse. I can't recall that, ma'am.
Okay, if I showed you your supplemental report, would it refresh your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point for the approach.
Sure.
I almost thought I was going to pull out the report to refresh his memory. You know, I got the report right here, so I was going to pull it out. I can refresh your memory, officer, Mr. Officer of the law. You say she rude? No, she mad. Therapist, she like, look, y'all accuse my client of this and he didn't do this, you know, quote on air quotes, right? And he didn't do this. And she had this relationship with these other men, right? Hey, Nene. So, yeah, I want to make it like I ain't your friend. I ain't here to be cool with you. You said what? He was like, I said, good morning. Yes. No, it ain't that type of party. You say attract more flies with honey. She got her red glasses on. She's serious this morning, and she ain't playing no games. Not with him. Blaming her client. How dare he? I was gonna refresh his memory. I got the report. You got it in the report, dude. So yeah, let's refresh him real quick. I wonder why they objecting to that. Maybe because they didn't ask him about these questions. Yeah, they definitely better get it right. I don't know. And so listening at all the evidence that we have going on. The third, okay, you said you think because the third party defense is not accepted. Okay, for Bradley, yes, but for the other dude, no. So Bradley is got that has to be the nephew, he my nephew, but he not my nephew guy. Yeah, I'm thinking that's what. And which okay, wait a minute. Gosh, I didn't think they were gonna be over there that long for that. Okay, let me. I'll TiVo us past this. Oh, of course.
To what we were discussing at the bench, but I did give this some thought at some point during the trial that the reason I would allow this to, it's much like if it's reverse Williams rule. If the roles were reversed, domestic violence, killing, the history between the parties, it becomes admissible. So who wanted to inquire of the detective on this point as far as whether there's a public record as far as that
I
arrest?
just ran Mark Burke with his date of birth for his CCIS, and I don't see any arrest for domestic violence or misdemeanor battery.
Since the jury's out, Detective Newman, what they're trying to figure out is in your report, apparently you had some information about that person being arrested for domestic violence. We were trying to distinguish whether that was based on hearsay that somebody told you, whether there's actually a public record of the arrest that you discovered in your investigation. If you know that off the top of your head, which you probably don't based on what you previously said. But that's what they're trying to figure out.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't recall that. I remember there was a fraud case from Port St. Lucie that we actually had a report number from. I don't recall any domestic violence getting a report for anything for that. So
I see the fraud case, and it looks like it was all of us.
So with that, anything else on the proffer? I would sustain the objection because it does look like it's based on hearsay and there's no actual basis for his personal knowledge as far as there being actual arrest in that regard.
Judge, can I at the time
Sure.
during your investigation, Mark Burke was under charges, had been arrested for charges with Tonia for a fraud case?
yes, I can't recall the case number, but I believe we did get a copy of that. I think it was Port St. Lucie Police that did the case on that.
And they were co-defendants.
I believe they were co-defendants, yes, ma'am.
Did you learn during your investigation that Tonia was afraid of Mark Burke because of that case?
There might have been people saying that, but with the amount of contact she was still having with him and meeting up with him when he still had an active warrant, I didn't really take that as she was afraid of him.
No, I don't want you to misinterpret what I was saying. If you wanted to ask him about that situation,
Yes.
I'm not precluding that because
Yes.
that's a separate motive situation. I just didn't want something to come in that was hearsay of an arrest that didn't happen through the other domestic violence arrest. So I'm not precluding that.
Yes, sir.
And the state's objection wasn't to that. But just to be sure, I don't know if you heard that, there's, as far as the arrest with regard to the fraud situation, that being a separate motive, I'm not precluding that.
Well, and I guess my question about, because I'm looking at the fraud case and it says that Mark Burke wasn't even arrested on a warrant in the fraud case until August 27, 2018. So she's already murdered by the time he's arrested.
But he knew that the arrest warrant was out based on the evidence he was hiding out at Tomlinson's.
Or there's an
house.
inference that he knew of the global situation and its
Right.
possible motive involved.
Well, I mean, there's no evidence of that that's been introduced in this trial so far, but
He's about to introduce it.
Right. All right, so, but the original objection was to the domestic violence arrest, which we've covered. There is no such arrest. So I'll sustain the objection as far as hearsay on that. It appears to be erroneous hearsay information from somebody else. All right, so I think we've at least made some headway clarifying where we are, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, and I guess, so when I redirect him, are we permitted then to be like, so is there some domestic violence arrest between Mark Burke that you're aware of between him and the victim? And he's gonna say no. Because now the jury thinks that they got sent out of the room after she
Well,
asked this question.
that's up to you. I could instruct them to disregard the question because he didn't answer it. He didn't answer it in the affirmative. He said, I don't know.
I know. But
Yeah, that's up to
my
you.
concern is that obviously the appearance of objection gets sent out of the
It's
room.
just part of standard
All right,
litigation trial stuff that happens.
we'll address what we're gonna do then.
Right. Otherwise, you're left with the argument that there's no evidence of that. That was just the question. The classic voir dire that I've heard 1,000 times where, didn't I prosecute you for, I think this is your own voir dire. Didn't I prosecute you for this the other day? No, you didn't. That's the question versus the answer. All right, let's bring in the jury and we'll continue. And Detective, if you could scoot closer to the microphone as well, jurors may have some difficulty hearing you. Please continue your cross-examination.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Sir, in the course of your investigation, you learned that Mark Burke had an active arrest warrant at the date of the murder for a fraud case. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And that his co-defendant in that case was actually Tonia Wise?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that Miss Wise was afraid of him because of that case. Is that correct?
Well, there had been people that had said that, but she had had numerous contacts with him after he had an active warrant, and she never turned him in and met with him on a regular basis. So I didn't know how afraid of him she was.
Okay. And when was the last time she had seen Mark Burke, to your knowledge?
I believe when I interviewed Mr. Burke, he said it was the week of her disappearance, and she had performed oral sex on him in his car.
Okay. And I think during your direct with the state that you said Miss Wise had been talking to a person by the name of Giovanni Alvarado, that you learned that. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And actually she was supposed to, on the night of her murder, meet up with Giovanni Alvarado. Is that correct?
That's what several people were saying. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that during the course of your investigation, you also learned that a gentleman by the name of Jared Christie had dropped her off at her mother's house on the night of her murder. Is that correct?
That would be, I mean, because that was Mr. Casino, right?
Correct. He goes by the street name Casino, but his
Yes, ma'am.
legal name is Jared Christie.
Yes, ma'am.
And during the course of your investigation, you got a DNA sample from Bradley Rodriguez Jr. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you got a sample of DNA from Giovanni Alvarado, correct?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
And you got a DNA sample from Mark Burke, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you get a DNA sample from Jared Christie too?
I don't recall.
Okay, you don't remember if you got that one?
No, ma'am.
I have no further questions for this witness.
No questions. Subject to recall.
Thank you, Detective Newman. You may step down. You're subject to recall by the attorneys. Please make sure they have contact information for you. And the state's next witness